Good morning, all. My name's Anthony Light, and I'll be looking after this session today, which is entitled Quality Insurance. And as you can tell, this is the parallel session number two, and of course, the best one in terms of that. So we have five great presentations today. Please, please join me in providing some guidance in terms of your questions during the presentations in the Q&A and chat. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians and owners of the lands on which we are meeting today. I'm meeting on the lands of the Bindal and the neighbouring Walgarugaba people, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. We've got five presentations, so the time will go quick. Each of them have 15 minutes, and we'll start with Gudrun Wells, who is going to share clinical research results with Australian participants, and she is from CTIQ. So if Gudrun, if you can share your screen and we'll get going.
Thanks, Anthony. All right, that work? No. Great.
Yep, all good.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you for having me today. I'm talking about one aspect of the Beyond the Form project, which was a collaboration between CTIQ and the VCCC Alliance. And what we're talking about is sharing the results of clinical research with the participants who were part of that research. So the Beyond the Form project looked at a whole bunch of different types of communication after the participant has done the consent process. So this is all the different types of ways you can communicate with participants during the project and at the end of the project. Um, on the screen here, you can see what we call different elements of communication. And what I want to talk about today is the sharing of results of the research. So first thing I wanted to look at was whether participants want to receive the results of the research that they take part in. And what we've heard is that most people do want to know. What you can see on the screen are quotes from people who took part in workshops who were participants. And you can definitely see a lot of enthusiasm there and a lot of different reasons for why people might want to see those results. There's a strong feeling that the sharing those results is a way to respect the time and energy that people spent on those clinical trials. But interestingly, the people that we talk to, both in those workshops and through our networks, most of them don't receive any results about the research that they take part in. We also did interviews with site staff, and they had similar experiences where many of them didn't receive results from sponsors to be able to send them on to participants. And this is really shows that there's something going wrong in the system if there's this really strong desire for these results and they aren't being shared. So what I wanted to talk about today was particularly what HRECs can do to try and encourage this process to happen more routinely. So if we look at this from a different way and try and answer the question of, can researchers share those results with participants? If we look at the national statement, sharing research results is recognised as showing the ethical principles of respect, beneficence and justice. And there's several clauses which talk about that researchers should tell participants whether they will receive the results, when they would be able to access a summary of those results, and that those summaries should be clear and easy for them to understand. Similarly, ICH-GCP has a clause in it which is saying that they should inform the participants about the results, with the additional caveat that it should respect the participants' preference about whether they want to have those results or not. So there definitely is guidance out there that this is something that we should be doing. If we look at what the international reporting requirements are, Australia doesn't actually have a requirement that these results need to be shared, but there are other jurisdictions where this is set up as the standard. In the EU, for example, if your trial involves therapeutic goods, it is required to be listed with both the summary of results and a lay summary on a portal that has been developed, a centralized portal, within a year of that last patient, last visit. The US has similar requirements if depending on where your funding has come from, but they don't have that centralized portal quite so much. If you look at what the World Health Organization recommends, so the including that summary of results in clinical trial registries is part of what is meant to be there. However, a recent study, a study that came out this year, actually looked at a whole bunch of registries, including the ANZ CTR, and it looks like there's routinely about 10% of trials are having those results put up there. So again, why is this proving to be a difficult thing? If we look at what the usual process is for what has to happen for the participant to receive those results, there's quite a few steps and there's several different parties that are involved. The trial has to be conducted and then the results are analysed and written up by the sponsor, and then the sponsor publishes those results and notifies the sites or somehow shares those results with the sites. And then the sites have the responsibility of seeking site approval from HRECs or RGOs to send those results out to participants. So there's 3 different parties that are involved at different stages to get those results to the participants. What can go wrong? So when you're looking at the step of analysing the data and writing up results, the sponsor may not do that because the trial was abandoned, or it could be because the results weren't favourable, or it could be because they don't have the resources available to develop a lay summary of those results. When it comes to distributing those results to site staff, the sponsor may no longer have a relationship with the site. Often contracts end at the data closeout stage. And if it's a trial involving therapeutic goods, there are additional considerations for how those results are promoted in Australia, which I'll talk about in a couple of slides. When it comes to the site staff sharing those results with participants, they may not have the resources to seek ethical approval or to contact the participants. And finally, if the participant receives the results, they may not be easy for them to interpret. So how can we set up studies for success? A key thing that we would recommend after this work in the Beyond the Form project is that sponsors work with sites to write a communication plan right at the beginning of the process, which would lay out who is going to have carriage of developing those summaries and results and who is going to be distributing those results as well. So the budgets and contracts should include those resources to do that work of developing and distributing the lay summaries. HRECs have a role at this stage to check that there is a plan for how these results are going to be distributed. And also they have a role in providing guidance about how to go through the process of seeking approvals. This is particularly important if the site has closed out by the time that and potentially the HREC approval has also closed off before those results are ready to distribute. When we get to the stage of analysing that site closeout point, so this can be several years after that communication plan was written, HREC can confirm that those results are still going to be developed. Similarly, the sponsor can also work on developing a really good lay summary, so consulting with consumer reps about the language that they're going to use and checking with legal advice about if they are involving therapeutic goods in that trial. Once that lay summary has been developed, the HREC can also review the language to make sure that it is actually appropriate as part of their review before it gets sent out to the participants. So there's several different points there where HRECs have a really key role in trying to encourage researchers to do a good job of developing and delivering those results to participants. So I've mentioned a couple of times that if your trial involves therapeutic goods, the situation is a little bit different. And that's because the Therapeutic Goods Act in Australia prohibits the advertising of prescription medicines to the public. So there is guidance from the Medicines Australia Code of Conduct to sponsors of pharmaceutical research so that they don't inadvertently promote to the public. And specifically to this issue, the sharing of results is permitted under scientific exchange with relevant stakeholders. And the important thing here is that relevant stakeholders does include research participants. So this guidance by the Therapeutic Goods Act means that people need to think about it, but it doesn't mean that it can't happen. And it's really up to those sponsor companies to make a risk-based decision about how they want to share the results. So this is not something that HRECs need to consider, but it's just something to be aware of, but it is something that sponsor companies are needing to think about. So in order to try and make it easier for people, both HRECs and researchers to do this job well, one aspect of the Beyond the Form toolkit, which the QR code is up there, is guidance for ethics committees and guidance for researchers. So as I said, today I've been talking about research outcomes, and that document does have some guidance for researchers about what they should be thinking about when they're developing communication plans and delivering those research outcomes. For this audience, the most useful piece is probably going to be the guidance for ethics committees. So that has more information about some of those regulatory requirements that I was talking about today. It has guidance about how to review communication plans and how to set up systems to review pieces of communication as they come to you. And it also has a really useful checklist for reviewers to go through and when they're reviewing those things. So we're really hoping that this will be a useful piece to help the HREC side of that multi-pronged process, make it easier to get results out to more people in a format that they can understand. Another piece that's in there is that we have a really great webinar recorded on there, which included a passionate research participant, an HREC member, and also a representative from Medicines Australia talking more about that piece about how the Therapeutic Goods Act interacts with all of this. So that's my presentation for today.
Oh, thank you very much, Gudrun. It's great to hear all about that. We do have time for a quick question. We do have one that I thought it was very topical is what happens when, unfortunately, the participants pass away? Can those results from the research be passed on to their family members? What are your thoughts on this, Gudrun?
So another aspect of that we looked at in the Beyond the Form toolkit was the role of people to support participants. And there's many different ways that those people can be really helpful for participants taking part in clinical trials. And I think this is something, so one of the things that you can, is participants might want those support people in various different ways. And considering how they are going to be involved in communication is a really useful thing to do early on in the trial. This definitely is something that's come up with some of the site staff that we've talked to in exactly that situation. Like the people who supported the participant through that trial would also contributed a lot of effort and time to that trial and would like to know how it came out. So it's something that's best sort of like if you can like have that conversation with participants early on to try and understand what it is that they and their support people want, then you can have that in writing to say, yes, that this is what we want to do.
Yep, sounds great. Thank you very much. Please join with me in thanking Gudrun for her presentation. Great to see, and we'll move on to the next one. The next one we have